We really admire and appreciate the work that you're doing. You, as coaches, are frontline workers and are changing people's lives daily. And the information we're presenting today is as much for you as coaches as it is for the young people and the people that you're working with. And so what we'd like to do is to introduce you to perhaps a paradigm shift in how you can focus on mental well-being, particularly in the sport space. And what we mean by transforming the narrative is changing the way we talk about it, right? So it's not about adding one more thing to an already packed plate. It's not about now we're doing mental well-being. It's something that you embed and you're probably already doing without even knowing it. So the paradigm shift is, how do I create a culture of well-being in general that includes mental well-being, as opposed to striving for this culture of mental toughness, right? And so the difference here is, I like to describe it in such a way that relates to physical training, right? And so if we really think about what we're doing when we're saying you have to be mentally tough, I hear that all the time. Coaches like, my athletes aren't mentally tough enough. And I say, what does that mean to you? And for me, when I hear that, I think, well, you're overtraining in one aspect of fitness, right? And so mental toughness to me is the equivalent of hyper focusing on endurance training instead of looking at the different components of fitness. And so agility, flexibility, strength training, right? All those things fit into what I like to call mental fitness. So when you're looking at creating a culture of mental well-being, you're really looking at cultivating all of the aspects of mental fitness. And that includes things like emotional literacy, social interaction, creating a space for the athletes to show up as humans and to acknowledge their whole being instead of just their physicality. So something as simple as starting with a reset. Let's do one now. So sit with your feet on the ground, settle into your seat, your hands in your lap. And what I invite you to do is to close your eyes if you'd like, or to gaze about 6 feet in front of you towards the floor as a way of minimizing visual distractions, visual information, and take 4 to 5 deep breaths. And what I'd like you to do is to breathe in for a count of 6, hold for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 7, and hold for a count of 4, and then do that again. In for 6, hold for 4, out for 7, hold for 4. And just notice what changes in your body. Why is this important to do? This is what I like to call a reset. And one of the things that it does is it helps people transition from one space to another. In our lives, we're busy, doing. And it's really critical that we pause and acknowledge where we've been, create some space so that we can move forward and invest in where we're going. If we keep just merging, blending, it's hard to track what's happening and it can be overwhelming to everybody. And so this is a great way to work with the athletes. And again, we're looking at the whole person. So instead of, when you check in, how are you doing, or launching right into practice, get everybody together and pause. Welcome to practice. Let's take a few deep breaths and center. Here's what we're focusing on today. What I like to do at the end of that is to actually offer a 2-word check-in. So what we're doing here is cultivating emotional literacy, 2 feelings that describe where you're at today: happy and stressed, excited and nervous, right? The other thing, what that does is it helps people cultivate emotional literacy, which is a critical aspect of emotional well-being, right? And it also helps us understand that, I hold more than one emotion in my being all the time. So I can feel tired and excited. Okay, so if I'm tired and excited, what do I need to do today to show up for practice and do my best, right? What that also does is it takes the focus off when you ask, how are you doing? Just the physical being. We tend to overfocus on the physical being instead of the whole person. So again, that's what we're talking about. We're looking at building emotional reserves, energetic reserves, filling the tank so that you can then draw on that energy, that health and well-being energy, from the mindset of a whole person. What that doesn't mean is that we're saying, if you're not feeling up to it, you don't have to practice. What we're acknowledging is that we are whole humans. What this also does is that it creates then the foundation for conversations with athletes for when they are struggling in a way that may indicate that there's something a little bit more critical going on, right? And so everything in mental well-being is not a crisis. However, when you skill up and understand the difference, then you know how to continue that conversation, because you've been talking about the whole person and their well-being from the start as part of the culture of your team. The athlete will probably more likely be ready to tell you something's different, or be more receptive when you approach them and say, I'm noticing you're sitting alone quite frequently, just wondering how you're doing, what's happening, right? And so there's a relationship there that's different than what are your splits? How are you going? How many reps did you do? And just seeing the physical being. So that in a nutshell is what we're offering you today, is really looking at creating this paradigm shift of how can I create practices, daily practices in practice and competitions that are looking at the whole person, so that that foundation is there, that when I'm noticing that there could be something potentially going on that's a mental health challenge, I don't feel like I'm jumping in cold and don't really know what to say, which is going to get at some of what Lynn and Sam are talking about in the next few minutes.
Sam, do you have anything to add? And then I will just transition us into the next section once you have added what you'd like.
I'm grateful to be here, I think. And I think that the whole person, I think you did a beautiful job opening us, Katie, for today. Thank you.
All right. I also am so excited to be here. And I love what you said, Katie, about creating this culture of mental well-being that really is part of whole health well-being, not just physical, not just mental, it's our own whole health. And so as we transition then into having a conversation when we think something might be happening around mental health challenges, it's a way easier transition because it's not out of left field that we are now having the conversation. So if you are when you're with the team that you coach, or your if you're an administrator, athletic trainer, official, and you're having these conversations ongoing, if you start noticing signs and symptoms of a potential mental health challenge, then that it's easier to move into. So if you coach an athlete who is typically on time, full board, all in, leader on the team, and you're noticing that the athlete is late a little bit, is withdrawn, isn't functioning in the way that you know that person to function, there are ways to approach the athlete then, right? And that's part of this program that Sam and Katie and I are talking about. It's called Mental Health First Aid, and it was in my introduction. The idea is that if you think something might be happening, we approach. We say, hey, I've noticed. Hey, I'm wondering, can you help me figure out what's happening here? And once we approach and create that safe space for an athlete to step into, amazing things can happen. And so mental health first aid is an evidence-based training that teaches us a number of things, increases knowledge. The one evidence that I think is most important is that it increases confidence to actually step in and approach, as we've talked about. It also increases knowledge of resources. And so you likely already have a list of physicians and orthodontists and all kinds of specialists, right? If there's a physical injury. Well, one of the things that we help cultivate then is what happens if there's a mental health challenge or a mental health crisis. Who am I pulling in? Who can I call? Who's on my team or on the team? And that's a critical part of this training as well. And the thing that I love about this curriculum is that while it's a fidelity-based program, we have this ability to make it relevant for the folks that we're teaching. So if we're teaching coaches, everything we do in this training is about how do we make this relevant for coaches. And so the stories, the scenarios, the examples are all the kinds of things that we believe as coaches you are exposed to on a daily basis. So there's nothing magical about this. It literally is probably stuff you already do, right? And so one of the things that Sam and Katie and I like to talk about is that when we start thinking about the mental well-being of the athletes that we serve, it's not about adding more to your plate. It's about managing what's already on your plate. So you already have athletes on the team who are experiencing mental health challenges. In fact, we know that 1 in 5 of us in any given year are experiencing mental illness. And so if you extrapolate that to the size of your team, the size of your club, the size of your school, we know it's right in this room. And so when we create ways to be able to manage what's already there, That's a beautiful thing. So what we're asking, what Whole Health Sport is encouraging in our Whole Health Nation is that you keep doing what you do, which is connecting, which is seeing, which is helping cultivate. And then in addition, you have these skills to give the confidence to step in and have some of these harder conversations. And so we're so excited to be partnering with JVA and AVCA to begin to explore how we might come together to make these conversations about mental well-being normalized as we do physical well-being.
Thanks, Lynn. That's really, I love the passion in your voice when you talk about this. You'll hear that in all of us. We are committed to this changing the narrative. And I'm wondering if you just highlight some of the skills that the coaches might take away from the training that they might be able to tap into and practice now.
Yeah, a couple things, super simple. The approach, first of all, is I'm wondering how you're doing today. And when you ask an open-ended question like that, you are creating a space for an athlete to step into if they're ready, right? So when we create a space, we're not requiring someone to step into that space. We're creating it. And then the athlete gets to decide, right? I'm ready to step in, so I want to tell you what's going on. And if I'm not ready to tell you what's going on, I'm still getting a message that you care about me and that you're seeing me. And so that approach is really important. Another big part is listening without judgment. And that's hard, right? As a coach, moving quickly, there's a lot going on. And now you're going to ask me to stop and listen non-judgmentally. Super important, because that's how we feel heard and seen. Another really important piece that you could take to practice today is this idea of giving reassurance. That is the see you, I care about you, I'm connected with you. And that might be something simple like, hey, Sam, I saw what you did this morning with your teammates around helping them, helping them prepare for their classes today. Thanks for doing that. That's I see you. Thanks for coming to practice early today and helping get set up. That was awesome. Simple, easy things that help us feel seen. And when you learn more about Sam and Katie and I, you know that each of us has these rich stories about how coaches saw us and really helped us transform into the humans that we are now. And so my passion comes from this place of knowing what you do absolutely changes lives. Is that helpful, Katie?
Yes. Thank you. Wonderful. Yeah. Sam.
And I would also add to that the reset. I mean, I think that the transitional spaces of so often carrying school into practice, or, what's going on at home, or navigating relationships, or what's happening on social media, and being able to pause. And it's like the time of acknowledging what we're experiencing and grounding into our bodies, just breathing, right? Taking our breath and using that time. What we're not saying is, shove it down and block it out and just, turn your attention here. It's like, okay, take a moment to acknowledge what's happening. And now what do I need to get ready to do this thing in front of me, whether that's a game or it's sports practice. So yeah, those are powerful. And I feel like you said it, but I'm like now replaying what you said in my mind, and I can't remember explicitly, but curiosity, I think, is another huge part of mental health first aid, and just the work that Whole Health Sport that we do together is choosing to put down judgment in stories and leaning in with curiosity. And that is so incredibly transformative in our own lives as humans, and also as we stand in front of our athletes and coach them. So yeah. So am my turn to talk about now what gets in the way?
It is.
So with all that said, I think acknowledging the fact, like we talk about a packed plate. I think that having had the opportunity to coach and be married to a coach, and now working as, I feel like we're like the team around the team, right? And the supporting coaches in this capacity, the amount that has landed, especially throughout the pandemic, that has landed on your plate is enormous. And it was this moment, this collective reckoning of, wow, coaches do so much. And these athletes are, you really are. And when said this opening, or Katie said this at the opening around front lines, like there is truth to that. And so there's it's an enormous privilege and an honor, and also can feel heavy. And so when this idea of like training and talking about this stuff, it's like, oh my goodness, the unknown of what I'm about to unpack becomes really big. And so I think that one of the things, Katie and I just finished a training. We went to a conference and worked with swimming coaches, and a person who was with us, a participant, said, and she exhaled, literally like audible exhale, and said, I am so glad. I was so afraid. I was feeling like this was going to be so heavy. And I think that that's, when we talk about, when we hear anything related to well-being or mental health, it's kind of it's like the elephant in the room, right? Where are we going to go with this? What are we going to unbox? And that is an obstacle. It's like, if I go there, what's going to happen? And that's exactly why we created this together. And I think that the fusion of the three of our skill sets, by bringing our life experiences and work experiences together, are able to hold space and say, okay, coaches, you don't actually have to become that ER surgeon. You can provide that Band-Aid, right? Or provide the directions to go to the first aid cabinet, or go seek at the athletic trainer for support. So in that process of becoming an equipped noticer, you're noticing things because you're on the front lines. And then you're able to actually become the bridge, not the one who's doing therapy. And so I think in our work, what we hear from coaches is kind of two extremes. I'm not going there, or this tilt toward becoming a therapist in a way, going there and then getting into the situation that feels a little bit over your head. And so what we have worked to build is an infrastructure to help you sit in that middle space, to notice, to go there, because the truth is it's already there. And if we are, we can try to turn from it, we can pretend it's not there, but in our pretending doesn't make it go away. And so when we turn toward, just like when you're working with athletes, if there's a fear there, helping them to turn toward the fear and name it is a powerful tool for performance. In the same way that this is a powerful tool of acknowledging what's already here, turning toward this hard stuff, sometimes heavy, and then learning what we do and becoming a bridge so that we don't fall into the space where we're outside the scope of our professional boundaries. So that's one of the objections, is like, what am I getting into? And what am I going to unbox? The other is really a misconception around what mental health is. And I think that part of my work in the world, as someone that as an athlete navigated the dips of mental illness, and as an adult now, and as a mother, like all the roles and hats that I wear, the idea that there's this othering of, they have, those people, right? Like that 1 in 5, like it's just this group over here. When the reality is that we all have mental health, all of us. It's a human thing. It's 5 out of 5 of us. So this isn't a conversation about a specific group that navigates mental illness. This is about all of us. And so when we can embrace that, we realize, we can actually, like, elevating mental well-being is a conversation that includes literally all of us. And yes, there are some times where your peers as coaches, as well as the athletes that you're coaching, may dip into that space where they need professional help. And we recognize too, and this wasn't part of our agenda, but just taking a moment to recognize the loss that the volleyball community and others have experienced. And so there are those cases of crisis situations where we can make an impact, and we sit in that space to do so. So turning toward, right, and embracing this idea that we all have mental health, and that when we're equipped with the signs to recognize, then we can better respond. And that response doesn't mean that we have to become the person who's doing the healing work. And so in that process, it actually lifts us. And we know this, National Council of Mental Wellbeing has the data to back that it actually elevates those who take the training and become mental health first aiders. It elevates their own mental health as well. And so then the other piece, the last piece that I wrote down, and there's a lot of objections. I mean, time, right? And just to speak to that briefly, is that if we don't take the time to turn toward, then it grows, right? So we have to decide when we're mapping out our year-long training plan and the progression, when we're training, there's the 3 things we can train, which is the technical component of sport. Then there's the physical component of sport. And then there's this mental component of sport. Those are the three things that we can train. And so wrapping our arms around that third component and pulling on, and not that you have to become the expert, but that surrounding yourself with a team around you and tapping into resources can be really powerful, because that time that we're not taking, we think we're saving time by jumping right into it. It's real. That illusion of urgency is so real. You got a limited amount of time. You got to get going, get busy. I feel it myself. I so deeply relate. And I know that pause is the power of the reset, that you'll actually get more from that pause. You'll get more, there'll be more intention in practices, and you'll be putting out less fires, right? You'll reduce the number of issues. So it's worth it, right? You have to take that leap of faith to do that. And the final objection, I know I added time in there, is our own stuff. And I've had, there was a coach that asked and said, I love this idea, and I struggle myself. And so I'm nervous to do this work. How can I be that person when I'm still struggling myself? And I think that's real, because I coach, right? I work one-on-one, so all three of us have our work, we have our work facing world, and all of us have stuff, whether that dips into the space of illness or not. And so what my response back was, it might not be you, right? But having a network and building a network and creating cultures where we're doing this work together allows you to tap someone in on that particular day that you might not have it. And that's something else that we talk about inside our Whole Health Sport Nation. So there are lots of obstacles. And I think that one of the things this pandemic kind of ripped the Band-Aid off of our eyes in a way, is it's been here, these challenges, cited as the second leading cause of death in young persons 10 to 34. It's here. And so it's time, right, to address it. And we're here to help. Yeah.
So I'm seeing a couple of questions, you guys. First one is, what are some signs that my athlete might be struggling? What should I look for? Either of you want to take it, or you want me to take it?
I want to share. When you were talking, Lynn, actually, I wrote this down. One of the things, so signs, yes, I think, but I would love to defer to you because this is your world, right? And I also feel compelled today to share that there may be athletes, the power of the reset and the power of connecting and the power of creating this culture where we talk about our mental well-being is critical, because there are going to be athletes and high performers. And without knowing too much about the culture of volleyball, I feel the energy I feel. And as someone who's a recovering perfectionist, there may be athletes who pretend to have it all together, right? And so that connection point and building that, so that when you ask, you're getting not this masked armored answer, but you're getting this connection where they feel safe enough to share. Because perfectionism, we know social perfectionism is on the rise, and that is connected to and correlated to challenges. So it might be hard to tell, which is in the importance of that connection piece. And also there are other signs. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Sam, that was perfect, because what we're looking for with signs and symptoms is something that's different from baseline. But if what we know is baseline already is signs and symptoms, it's hard to identify. And so moving back then to what Katie said, first out, it's creating that culture of safety and protection and vulnerability so that athletes can have those discussions, even if it starts so easy. If a coach had asked me how I felt at the beginning of a practice, woo, baby, right? And so that would have created psychological safety over time. And my coaches were amazing. And it wasn't that kind of culture. And so I think it's creating that culture. And that way we have a baseline to notice if someone is withdrawing, if someone is late, if someone doesn't look, if someone's not keeping their personal hygiene up, if someone is more isolated, if someone seems scared, right? Then we can start to notice those changes because we can understand a baseline. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I like that, how you both responded to that. And if I can offer a few more tweaks to what you're saying, how are you feeling is a typical, people oh, don't ask me how I'm feeling, right? And so what I say is, what's happening in your worlds today? Where are you at today? What's going on? And inevitably you'll get the fine. So the follow-up question is, what does fine look like in your world today? Like describe fine to me today, so that what you're doing is you're skilling up people on how to articulate what's going on in their world, so that when they do, perhaps when they are isolating or something, maybe they will be able to say, I feel really lonely, because you practice saying those things beforehand. And there was a question about the difference between boys and girls, young men and young women, men and women. And I have to say, to be mindful of placing people in the gender boxes, because if I'm a woman walking with perfectionism, or if I'm a young girl with perfectionism, I'm not going to give you anything except I am rocking this world out here, and in here I'm a mess, right? But I'm not going to share that. Whereas young men may actually be more willing to share what's going on. So it's really about the human and creating that space to have those conversations and practice building emotional literacy, building skills and tools to be, so that when you need to check in on a symptom that's emerged, there's some tools there already, because it's really hard. It's really hard to say, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm lonely, particularly if I've never practiced it before in a smaller way, when it's maybe feeling overwhelming. And so again, and as Sam said, check yourself. Am I afraid of opening this because actually today I'm feeling sad and lonely? And so I need to tap out, but we've all agreed as a coaching staff that we're going to support each other in this. And I just need to tell my peer, I'm concerned about so-and-so. Do you mind checking in with them? I don't have the reserves right now. I'm managing my own well-being right now, mental well-being right now. Great. What incredible modeling.
I love that, Katie. And when you both talked a little bit about that perfectionism, it really leads us into the question around how social media plays a role, right? So would you both like to talk a little bit about that?
I go first. Well, it doesn't. Yeah, I mean, I think we both have a lot to share. Katie, you want to go first?
Yeah, social media. I appreciate the incredibly positive aspects of social media, and it is one of the most dangerous tools, I think, in existence today. It's too easy to sit in the cheap seats, not sheets, cheap seats, and just lob ugly. And if you're feeling miserable, on the other hand, I know that the text hotlines are super important, and that people will connect in ways that they may not. So I feel like it is here to stay. And the more we have strategies to manage it in a way that addresses mental well-being and mental health, the stronger the individuals will be in understanding how to respond when the ugly comes their way. It's inevitable that it will happen. Or if I'm feeling like I need to, throw ugly on someone else, that's about me, usually, not about the other person.
I think that. So with teams and issues that arise, one of the greatest fears of humans, I think, youth and emerging adults, is that fear of judgment and the fear of missing out and that feeling of exclusion. And so what it does is it puts it in our face. And so if there's a Snapchat happening here with, not including someone, so I think what I'm hearing you say is, if we can proactively boundary and say, here's what's okay, here's what's not okay, here's how we show up as a team, here's what's expected, and then we hold the line, right? So we communicate that clearly. Yes. That clarity can create this container that allows them, and then we follow through, right? When it comes to that, the pressure. So what I see, the piece that I can add to the social media is, we know it's preying on that dopamine rewards center, right? Like we know that and you can speak to this greater than I can, Katie, and there's so much when it comes to the science of it, when it comes to the real, where the rubber meets the road, and you have an athlete who is navigating hard times, and the source of that is when they go on and they're on social media, right? Being able to remove that and help them see that their worthiness isn't hinged on this is real. I feel this when I'm with athletes and groups of athletes. If they don't get a certain number of likes in a certain amount of time, and it literally starts to corrode at their confidence being. So being able to, this is aligned with how we opened, which is when we have a culture of human first, we can rest on this foundation of, I am a human and I am worthy of love simply because I'm human. And now when we fold in performance, it becomes about how we behave and show up in the world. It's the small decisions that we make, the actions that we take. And so that grounding of, I am a human the power of that, if that's the language that you're folding into your club, will help to transcend those spaces of social media where it's like, my worth can't be measured by how many people like me or don't, or if I'm make a mistake on the court, or we don't win this game, I'm not bouncing up and down. My worthiness isn't here and then down. It's steady. And now I'm open to being able to dig into performance in a new way. And so I think that the social media, what I see is the connection and the enmeshment, right? That entanglement with their worthiness. So being able to separate that. You can't do all of it as a coach. It's not your job, right? Like you stay in your lane. However, by onboarding this idea of human first, you can really make an impact on it. So yeah.
Well said.
If I don't feel comfortable approaching my athlete, who should I bring in to help address the issue? Another coach or parents? You know what? It really depends, first of all. And as Katie said, if it's a bandwidth kind of thing, I don't have it I can't do it today. It's just not in me today. Because our coaching staff works together, we know that we can ask for help. I also will say it's important to have other resources in your cadre of resources. So if you're in a college campus, who on campus is available if there's an athlete who needs some additional support? If you're in a high school, what supports are available, and are they set up ahead of time so you can provide that trusted transfer? So I might say, hey, Sam, you know what? We have a counselor at this school who's amazing. Her name is Katie. And I'm wondering if I can take you to Katie's office today and have a conversation. I totally trust her. And so it's creating those relationships ahead of time so that when the situation arises, we're able to do what needs to be done quickly.
Back to that, Lynn, too, just thinking of the coach who's listening to this going, okay, and so I haven't yet. So what do I do now? Like right now? And I would say to that it's okay to say, I'm not sure what to do, but I'm willing to walk with you and we're going to figure this out and let's find some resources, right? Yep. So being able to not know, and I know, Katie, like you speak to this a lot, right? When we do our round tables, and like for a coach to be the one that doesn't know is a really uncomfortable space because coaches are supposed to know all the things, and we're human, and it's bumping against the outside, like the edge of your expertise. And so being able to say, I'm not sure, I'll get back to you, or even unless it's a crisis situation, right? And help is needed now, being able to take time to breathe and reset. Yeah. And give that reassurance.
Nice. All right. Here's another one. I coached my daughter and team for 5 years. They're now freshmen in college. I keep our group chat open and send notes of care very often. My daughter is playing for a good team in college. They're having her setting hands change, having her travel with both teams, and all this along with suddenly not having family and a boyfriend and a dog to comfort her is causing her to cry herself to sleep every night and stress eat, so she's gaining weight. What can I do to help her from a distance?
My mama heart. Yeah, I think we probably all want to have something to share on here. How would you answer?
Katie, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. So first, as Sam just said, my mama heart. So it's so one thing to consider would be, I actually just talked with a mom whose child was struggling with finding their way at college. And I started asking questions about what their life was like and how they would describe themselves. And what actually turned out to be causing the most angst and stress was fundamentally he described himself as an introvert. And he had his own room at home, had his own space, had his own everything, and now had a roommate, a shared bathroom, and it was orientation and everything else, and on a team, and everything was like, all people all around. And so the intervention was really helping him identify moments in time where he could find his own space, like create his own separate space where he could go and recharge and reset. And so as a parent or guardian or someone who's on that side, I think sometimes we rush into fix because our heart is hurting because our child is hurting. And so my one thing to do would be to build out questions and try to find resources and acknowledge that, listen, changing your technique is brutal. I mean, it just is really hard because that's also aligned with your identity. Right? This is my thing. This is what I do. And so how that's transmitted and it's like your terrible first times, right? You're going back to being a learner mindset. And if everything else has changed, the confidence level there can be really challenged. And so what are the other spaces where your daughter is feeling confident and competent, and helping her identify those? What resources are available to her? Ask her to perhaps talk with a coach to help get some feedback on the progress. I mean, or other, other team members, practice with other team members. And so potentially connecting versus isolating might be helpful for her. So I guess my main response would be to acknowledge your heart space and then think, okay, so big picture, what questions can I ask that will empower her to maybe interface with new resources differently versus trying to fix it for her?
Yes. And it's hard, Katie, it's hard to do that. So I would add to that component of self-efficacy, that the knowingness that she can tackle the hard things, and that she can be like that, feeling sad, that feeling frustrated, and all, like naming what she's experiencing is also, it's okay. And I think that just from that parent child perspective can be so challenging, because exactly like you said, like they're in pain, and then I'm feeling it and wanting that's uncomfortable. So being able to hold space for all of it, and whatever, right, asking the questions and then communicating back that with tools and supports, like that they're capable of navigating the challenges that are in front of them, and that they're supported. Yeah.
That was my big takeaway, is I trust you. You've got this. I'm here. I'm supporting you. How can I best support you? Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you both. It's always an honor to be here. And thank you to Junior Volleyball Association for inviting us. It's been a real privilege.
Yes. Thank you all, Sam, Lynn, and Katie. This was so valuable and so powerful. And